Hello YouTube. I've been meaning to tell you about Chukotka for some time now, and it's a very interesting place, and it brings you into that whole picture of the Arctic, and you can see that there are developments taking place this year in Arctic, but of course other things happened before and will happen from now on. See, the Arctic Ocean is the focal point of the circumpolar north. Territories bordering this region include those of Russia, the United States, Canada, and some other countries. There is a distant and a mysterious peninsula. It's set on the edge of the Arctic, Chukotka. It's a land of sacred places, ancient peoples, and an excellent variety of wildlife. It's frozen and rugged, and the Chukotka Peninsula on the Russian's northeastern frontier, only 55 miles from Alaska. You have to think about it. It's one of the few remaining truly wild places in this world. You can call it the Chukchi Peninsula, Chukotsky Poloostrov in Russian, or Chukotka. That's how I pronounce it. It belongs to the permafrost zone of the tundra. And the Chukchi upland is a mixture of mountain tundra and frozen desert. Also, as I told you before, the Russian Arctic is a treasure trove of natural resources. Chukotka itself is an area extraordinarily rich in marine mammal life, and it's a land full of very unexplored mineral resources. Outside of that, now you know where it is. It also has very important strategic air bases of the Russian Federation facing the United States. What's important to you and me? There are many mysteries. Some of them are very paranormal. But there are also lakes in the tundra of Chukotka. Some of them are very large. There is one lake, and I bet you've never heard about it. It's called El Gidgin Lake, and it's associated with the anomalous phenomena. I've collected information about this paranormal esoteric phenomena of this very remote Arctic land. Now, very few people in the West, and not that many in Russia, realize the abundance of mysteries. So let's start with the peninsula itself and its very interesting past. Once upon a time, there was a land bridge connecting North America to Asia. It was during the Pleistocene, the term for the time period that spanned about 1.8 million to 11,000 years BCE, that most of the recent episodes of the global cooling or ice ages had occurred. Much of the world's temperate zones were alternately covered by glaciers during cool periods and uncovered during the warmer interglacial periods when the glaciers retreated. So whatever is happening today, this is not something new, and it's very questionable as to the source. There was a time period between the years of 28,000 BC and 8,000 BC. You can in the Soviet Union they said before Common Era, and that's what most people say. So that's why I'm using it. The North American ice sheets would appear and reappear, and the sea levels rose and fell. As far back as 11,000 years ago, during the Holocene period, the Bering Land Bridge served as a bridge between the continents of Eurasia and America. Now, the Holocene is the name given to the last 11,000 years of the Earth history, the time since the end of the last major glacial era or ice age. So, we do not know how long this period will last. This Holocene period has observed all of the humanity's recorded history and the rise and fall of all of its civilizations, as far as we can tell. Because we don't know what was there before, but we have hypotheses. Now, the Bering Strait, covered by ice, served as a bridge to Asian wanderers who used this bridge to migrate to North America. The primordial hunters of the Central and Eastern Asia discovered and settled the land we know as today Chukotka, and then they went forth to Alaska, and from there as far away as Tierra del Fuego. And this migration was executed in stages. Mammoths are believed to have roamed ancient Chukotka during this Holocene period, Holocene. Remains of dwarfed mammoths, only some 1.8 meters, were discovered on Wrangel Island, and they have been dated to approximately 73390 to 4740 BCE. That means that when some of the Egyptian pyramids were built, mammoths still roamed the earth. Wrangel Island is a protected reserve since 1974, and it's located on the border of the East Siberian and Chukchi Sea. It's a very interesting place in itself. Now, the geomorphologic reconstruction indicates that the Wrangel Island form a part of Beringia, an area that included Chukotka, Alaska, and the huge expanse of the surrounding shelf during the late Pleistocene. It was Vitus Bering, a Danish-born explorer for the Russian Tsar in the 18th century, who was the person after whom this Beringia was named. The Bering-Chirikov expedition explores the waters of the North Pacific between Asia and North America. Now, approximately 10,000 years ago, Beringia slowly descended underwater. Chukotka was losing its ice cover during the same period. Underwater nautical archaeology helps us find answers as to when exactly human beings began to cross Beringia. Probably we'll find answers, but there are other enigmas of this very mysterious land that will remain forever unsolved. For example, Whalebone Alley. I don't know, perhaps the better term for this strange and very mysterious place should be the Arctic Stonehenge. Soviet archaeologists discovered Whalebone Alley on Sikluk Bay on the northern shore of the Itigran Island in 1976. It consists of a long double line of bowhead whale bones, jaws and rib bones, running parallel along the shore for hundreds of yards. Most of the bones, especially the enormous jaw bones, mainly of bowhead whales, remain standing, buttressed by lichen-covered rocks. Enormous skulls of the whales and square rocky pits are located at intervals along the alley, lining the beaches of the island. So what religious ceremonies were performed here? Was this only a ceremonial Eskimo site, apparently in use around 600 years ago? What are the mysterious stone structures discovered on the island? 4 ring structures about 2 meters in diameter, made of huge stones. What rituals did the natives see in the strange amphitheater located just in the center of the monument and rimmed by huge stones in a semicircle of 5 meters in diameter? What caused the ancient inhabitants to abandon the island many hundreds of years ago? Those who lived on the island in the later century, they knew nothing of the origin of this Whalebone Alley. See, that's one. Now let's get to something even, I would say, more antique. And we're talking about a very incredible map of Haji Ahmed. It was back in June of 2000 that Geography and Map Division of the Library of Congress received a valuable gift. It was a map of Haji Ahmed. The description is as follows: wood engraving 43.5 inches by 42 inches. This map with extensive marginal text was printed in 1795 from the original wood blocks created by Haji Ahmed in 1559. No example of the 1559 printing is known, and actually most scholars believe that the map was only printed in 1795. In that year, 24 copies were made and only 5 are reported in libraries in Europe. As far as we know, Paris, London, Vienna, and Venice. Also, there are 2 copies, as far as we know, that exist in private hands. This work contains the first Ottoman Turkish text prepared for mass production by printing, and is one of the 6 earliest texts printed in one of the 4 major languages of the Islamic civilization. This document also represents the first attempt to print a world map, as well as a technical text in Ottoman Turkish or any other Islamic language. It was prepared in Venice, presumably for a Turkish audience, and utilizing a European cartographic image of the world. Now, the existence of Beringia was not known until the 20th century, but the Haji Ahmed map depicts the true outlines of the North American continent as it was 11,000 years ago, when North America was joined by Siberia by ancient subcontinent of Beringia. The Haji Ahmed map was published in 1559, long before the Russian Cossacks ventured into Siberia, before any exploration of Alaska, before the scientists were able to determine what Beringia looked like. The map shows land where today there is nothing but water. But the land did exist there during the Ice Age. Did the cartographers use ancient mariner maps? How else can we explain this map? Those who made the map in the 16th century could not have used a chronometer, for the instrument was not invented until the 17th century. Even if we were to agree with the most scholars, so to say, as the description in the Library of Congress states, how would cartographers know about Beringia in 1795? Okay? There is something else. I want to talk about a very interesting tradition, a peculiar Arctic small tool tradition. The earliest well-documented human occupations of the Arctic, between 10,000 and 7,000 years BCE, they're assigned to a poorly defined phenomenon known as the Paleo-Arctic tradition. It is known only from the lithic artifacts, especially microblades and small bifaces. This is a term that is used to describe flake stone artifacts that have been flaked or chipped on both sides. The Arctic small tool tradition is characterized by small, delicately crafted projectile points, blades, and burins, which are generally no more than 5 centimeters in length, and that's why they're called microlithic. It derives its name from the finely flaked tiny lithic tools that are its hallmarks. Lithic artifacts are those where the raw material is stone. This includes artifacts that are manufactured by chipping, grinding, or battering. Microblades, pulled burins, small side and end scrapers, stone harpoon tips, arrowheads, and knives. It was one of the most distinctive and widespread circumpolar cultural traditions. Then it appeared about 4200 BCE. Evidence of this strange culture has been found on ancient beaches throughout the high Arctic. The origins of this tradition are obscure. It doesn't appear to be related to the preceding Paleo-Arctic tradition, and its most likely source is Eastern Siberia. Who were the tiny tools made for? I doubt that the people of the Arctic at that time had much time on their hands to build tiny tools for altruistic or even religious reasons. But there are legends of the small people, so to say, who inhabited lands of the Arctic. And we'll get to it one day, because I have a lot to tell you based on the Russian sources. But archaeological research in the Arctic presents a number of unique challenges, including excavation into permafrost, short-filled seasons, and immense logistical problems. All of these challenges faced a very interesting person, Nikolai Nikolaevich Dikov, a Soviet scientist who was born in 1925 and died in 1996. He was a brilliant scholar, a bold explorer, and prolific writer. His knowledge included archaeology, ethnography, geography, economics, and other disciplines. Chukotka was his area of research, studies, exploration, and discoveries. I have used many sources for my research, including Dikov's books. I recommend his books to anyone interested in the Arctic paleoethnography, and I believe you can find one in English. It's Asia at the Juncture with America in Antiquity, the Stone Age of the Chukchi Peninsula, by Dikov. And I now want to get to that special lake. Gin Lake, located 100 kilometers north of the Arctic Circle in the northeast Russia. Let's see, 67 degrees 30 minutes north latitude and 172 degrees 05 decimal east. It was created 3.6 million years ago by a meteorite impact that generated a crater around 23 kilometers in diameter. The lake fills the center of the crater and water depths at approximately 175 meters. The crater's central peak is hidden under the water. Since the impact, the lake has been filling with sediments that hold clues to the Earth's climate, presumably all the way back to the era of 5.3 to about 1.75 million years ago. At the time of the impact, the region was forested and the Arctic Ocean was virtually ice-free. There was an international expedition to the lake in May of 1998, and it recovered quite a lot of interesting sediment cores from the center of the 15-kilometer wide basin, penetrating almost 13 meters and 175 meters of water depth, using a percussion piston core from the lake ice surface. After all, there are 3 million years of record that exist beneath the lake. The scientists discovered, listen to this, a striking similarity between the Gin magnetic susceptibility record and the Bermuda Rise and the Bahamas Outer Ridge. This is one of the youngest and best preserved complex craters on our planet. Nevertheless, because of its remote Arctic location, Gin crater remains inadequately investigated. But it should be investigated because Gin is perhaps the finest terrestrial analog for craters on planet Mars. Numerous legends exist about this lake, tales of strange disappearances, presence of unknown beings, and more. According to one legend, a shaman capable of levitation resides in the area of the lake. From the description provided, the shaman is dressed in something that modern observers could recognize as a space suit. There are stories that once upon a time the natives caught a horrifying fish, and the vertebrae of this fish were as tall as a human being. They also say that there are strange northern lights or mirage over the lakes, and that when they come about, people who are nearby vanish without any trace. Now, there are rumors that the lake has a strange monster, bigger than the Loch Ness ones. This legendary, ideally round body of water on Chukotka allegedly contains another monster called Kalilgu. People try to walk by the lake. They don't come to approach too much. They say that the shamans don't even risk being nearby, except maybe for that interesting shaman I just told you about. The first scientist who was at the lake, at the shore of the lake, was academician Sergei Obruchev in 1934, well known in the Soviet Union and Russia due to his books about ancient history and primordial times. Now, he characterized the lake as strange and uncanny place, or horrifying place. And this monster Kalilgu was described in one of the books of the scientist and writer Alexander Kondratov. now a noted Russian UFO researcher and proponent of the ancient astronaut hypothesis, Vladimir Avinsky, had analyzed local legends. He found quite a lot of interesting things. This beautiful and mysterious land is beckoning those who seek areas of paranormal phenomenon, unspoiled by commercialism, and it fascinated Avinsky as it did others. In 1955, Russian archaeologists Sayapin and Nekrasov made an interesting discovery on a mountain near this El-Gidgin lake. It was a treasure trove of knives and blades made from silicon. A large rock protected the storage area where the artifacts mixed with small stones, and it was hidden for ages. But the description of the items discovered in 1955 is very brief, and it leads me to conclude that there might have been more to the find that has been so far revealed, and that's typical for some of the finds in the Arctic, and unfortunately the whole of Soviet archaeology science. Now, Dikov describes the items as very interesting and goes into some detail, but not sufficient to explain what made the items truly interesting. Again, if he described all of the artifacts, the area where the artifacts were found lies in the vicinity of the seasonal trails of the wild reindeer herds. A camp of those who hid or concealed the artifacts stood right at the shore of the lake. Were they hunters, fishermen, or some other group of humans who braved the wilderness to come to this distant lake? Now I want to talk about another area, somewhat related to Chukotka. And we have to go to, let's say, a sad past in Russian history. From 1932 to 1957, up to 2 million prisoners mined gold, silver, tin, and uranium in Chukotka and Magadan regions. Magadan lies below Chukotka, and my father, as a Soviet army soldier in the 1950s, told me about concentration camps and other events in that land. There were tens of thousands of political prisoners who lie buried in the tundra. Stalin's concentration camps prisoners were brought to the area on overcrowded barges up the river during the 3-month-long summer. They were to be utilized as slaves, and most would perish. But the Soviet government also sent other people to this distant peninsula. You see, Chukotka became the potential treasure house of mineral wealth for the Soviet Union's military needs following the Nazi Germany's invasion. Capable Soviet geologists were dispatched to the area. Among them was one whose name immediately drew my attention after I saw it in the digest put together by Nikolai Dikov. I'm speaking about Nikolai Nikolaevich Sachivanov. He also died in 1996. He was an academician of the Russian Academy of Science and Culture, an expert in geology and mineralogy. He was also a senior researcher of dowsing. I described his role in the research related to the buried Tallinn UFO in my books co-authored with Philip Mantle. Sachivanov was active in other paranormal research as well. It is virtually impossible to learn of his experience in Chukotka, except that he was the chief engineer of a strategic mining enterprise in August of 1941, that he was praised for his role in the geological research of Chukotka. Now, gold mining is a leading industry and is centered in Belibinsky, Smitovsky and Chaunsky district. And I believe that Sachivanov located mineral deposits using dowsing, or as in Russian they say biolocation. Biolocation or dowsing is an insufficiently understood technique for finding underground water and minerals, and has long been known in Russia under the imperial government, under the Tsars. Biolocation really began its development in 1960. in the Ministry of Geology of USSR. It was also called biophysical effect. Some researchers claim that dowsing involves an extraordinary sensitivity to anomalies in weak magnetic fields. Soviet studies in this area were initiated by Sachivanov. He had reportedly documented several dozen cases in which dowsing has been successfully employed in mining and drilling projects. Dowsing was taught to professional mineralogists and geologists in the Soviet Union. What's interesting is that one of the articles on this subject was written by Nikolai Sachivanov and Matveyev, somebody named V.S. Matveyev, was titled Electromagnetic Fields as Origin of the Biophysical Effect, and it was published in the International Journal of Paraphysics in 1976. Dowsing, according to the Soviets, has been successful in locating gypsum in Ukraine, commercial grade gold ore near Krasnoyarsk in Siberia, tin deposit in Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, iron in southern Urals, copper nickel ores near Krasnoyarsk, lead and zincs in other areas, and more, including discoveries of molybdenum, bismuth, tungsten, and bauxite. And the sites are classified. By the way, in 1980, Sachivanov, who was in Moscow, observed a response of a plant to a drastic simulation of another plant by an electric shock or burn at a distance of up to 800 meters. We're talking about vegetation. His experiments resulted in a very interesting article, some peculiarities of biophysical fields of plants and humans, which was published in Moscow. The Geo Pathogenic Zones and manifestations of actual geophysical phenomenon, they appear as extensive geophysical anomalies characterized by modified environmental parameters, differing from the statistically average ones. Very interesting. For instance, atmospheric geomagnetic fields, electrical conductance of the soils, geomagnetic field, etc. One of the areas by location is used in modern Russia is the study of geopathogenic zones for design, construction, and operation of highways and roads. It involves the technical diagnostic of bridges, pier foundation, abutment bases, and also assessment of permafrost soil conditions in the areas with permafrost. So we're back to the Arctic. I wanted you to know about dowsing. I'll talk about it someday more in my videos, but it's not explored to the extent as it should be. Did the young Soviet geologist learn his dowsing techniques in Chukotka? Or did he arrive there already experienced in biolocation? Large portions of the peninsula's interior are still unexplored, except by geologists and local nomads who move with their reindeer herds throughout the land, living in their yaranga or reindeer hide tents. Did Sachivanov learn something or gain specialized knowledge in Chukotka that urged him to study anomalous phenomena of the Soviet Union in later years? Those are the questions. I don't have the answers. But he was a very interesting person. Now I want to talk to you about something very interesting in another aspect. The so-called inexplicable winged objects. ULN is one area where the sea hunters of the early Chukotka lived. Archaeologists have collected paleoecological and archaeological data about ULN. There are fully preserved sites, some of the biggest Arctic monuments of Eurasia and America, and they belong apparently to the old Bering Sea Oqui culture, 2200 to 1250 BCE. There are the rich inventories of carved walrus ivory tools and art objects. Some of them demonstrate cultural and anthropological peculiarities of the people of Chukotka. The burial sites classified as Oqui by archaeologists also contain artifacts described by Nikolai Dikov as winged objects. Straight and short wings characterize the ULN type of the winged object. Other sites where mysterious winged objects were confirmed to exist in Chukotka are Vankarem and Inchun. Remember Vankarem. Nikolai Dikov calls such objects typical, but not really comprehensible or identified. The Soviet scientists conducted archaeological excavations in the area of the Chinin Bay in 1963, among other sites in Chukotka. He found winged objects there too. He believes the explanation given by a famous American anthropologist and geologist Collins regarding the purpose such objects had served: to provide extra weight to harpoons. In other words, an ivory winged object counterbalanced the weight of the ivory harpoon head, foreshaft, and socket piece. But at the same time, Dikov does not exclude other explanations for the mysterious objects: harpoon foreshafts or heads, maybe shaman accessories, etc. The winged objects were cut from walrus tusk. Anthropomorphic images decorated the objects. I looked at one of the winged objects, one from the Mintkin site. Clearly visible on the wings of the objects were images of space capsules or comets racing through the skies. The other object, much smaller, contained similar cosmogony images. The Smithsonian Institution's Arctic Studies Center has an interesting photograph of a more common butterfly-shaped wing object and an explanation of some of the zoomorphic images of the winged objects, as well as meaning of the Tunghat spirit worshipped by ancient Eskimos, a ferocious and powerful group of spirits who lived on the moon and were part animal and part human. Okay? One of the most remarkable archaeological discoveries in Chukotka was the find of a very large cemetery in Chukotka called Ekwen. This ancient Eskimo cemetery of the old Bering Sea Oakwood culture had been perfectly preserved in permafrost. The cemetery is over 200 years old. Soviet archaeologists Sergeyev and Arutyunov conducted excavations of the site. And this is where the winged object shown on the Smithsonian Institution website was found. The winged objects, just like Chukotka, are really beautiful, mysterious, and very much inexplicable. I am sure that when the distant Russian peninsula is thoroughly explored, more fascinating discoveries about its anomalous phenomena will be made. And I haven't talked to you about UFOs and some very strange beings that are said to exist in Chukotka. That's for the future videos. If you like my research, I ask you that you please kindly support it through my Patreon sign in the description, and stay tuned for more videos. Thank you for your attention.